During Donald Trump's first term, anti-Trump Republicans learned how to mask their Bush-era policies with pro-Trump language. But that isn't working this time around, as Blaze senior politics editor Chris Bedford explained in his Beltway brief. He joins us now to discuss this. So, Chris, let's start first by going through and let's explain the strategy that they used to use, right? The Republicans, they were over there trying to use these Bush-era policies. How did they do it back then?
They basically changed their tune, but didn't actually change any of the words to the script. You'd see this often, and Mitch McConnell was really a master of it. He would do exactly what Mitch McConnell wanted to do, whether that was on taxes or foreign policy or on judges. And he would mumble MAGA while doing it, and people were satisfied. They put out things like Cocaine Mitch and Red-Eyed Mitch and all this and that. Cocaine Mitch was a little bit older, I know, but that was how they decided to deal with it. And frequently, you would see Republicans doing this, and you kind of started to realize just how little they'd actually changed whenever the rubber met the road. For example, when Republicans were asked hard questions about COVID vaccination and corporate discrimination against Americans, Republicans were asked difficult questions about hospitals kicking people out because they hadn't taken some experimental vaccine. Republicans face difficult questions on Ukraine, as opposed to saying, "Well, what populist nationalists do, or what are my new ideas inform me?" They would mumble something about Ronald Reagan, basically always impugning his ghost, and say that it's not the government's job to actually get involved with protecting its people. Nothing really changed, but now he's back, and it's completely different.
Yeah, so let's what changed? I mean, why can't they get away with this anymore? Because this tactic worked for a long time, really. I mean, they stumbled along for years doing this, and it feels as if you're right. If you're just in the audience watching, for some reason, it doesn't work anymore. Why?
Broad backdrop to this whole thing, and please excuse me. I was at the dentist today, and I'm kind of stupid. And I didn't actually pay attention to what they were going to do. And it was really intense. So if half of my face isn't quite working, I was like, wait a second, you're doing what? And it involved a hammer and a chisel. So I may be a little slow in my talking today. But the overarching thing is that MAGA was no longer a couple of campaign slogans really pushed by one person that had electrified an American electorate. For now 8 years after that, people beyond simply you guys at Claremont and Michael Anton had been thinking about exactly what MAGA meant, what this populist nationalism meant. And at the same time, you had someone who was out of office, who for 2 years we knew was going to be the Republican nominee. So people were working on files, on papers, on projects, on what a new administration might look like, knowing essentially who the candidate was, at least clear-minded people. There was a blip there where some people thought it could be Ron DeSantis, but everyone kind of understood that it was going to be Donald Trump if he wanted it, and they could work towards that. So that's the background. And then there's the middle ground, which is very solid personnel. They're not simply picking up from old Bushies who are just going to do what old Bushies did, which was the last Republican who'd been in power before Donald Trump came in there. They didn't have to harvest bones from AEI, essentially, and Cato Institute, and people who didn't really like them. There are now people who are extremely solid personnel mixed with veterans from the first administration, and jobs that I personally know were regional important jobs were staffed by 20-something-year-old volunteers from the Chris Christie campaign are now staffed by 40-something-year-old veterans of C-suites. That makes a real difference in your personnel and the ability to execute on the orders, and also knowing what worked and what didn't work. And Trump's rude awakening that a lot of those executive orders and a lot of those promises were actually just ignored by both his own federal executive branch and by Congress. And then the final key to this is J.D. Vance, who is very different from Mike Pence. Mike Pence was someone who, remember, if you think back to it, kind of normalized Donald Trump in the eyes of a lot of conservatives and made them feel better about it. Mike Pence kind of thought he was in that role to keep guardrails on. J.D. Vance thinks he's in that role to serve Donald Trump and to push a complete and total change of the GOP. So when people like Senator Tom Cotton's the latest, he's going after one of Donald Trump's nominees to the Pentagon. And they had meetings this week, so things might change on that front. Elbridge Colby, And he's saying, listen, I'm opposing this guy right now because I want to make sure the president gets people who support what the president wants. J.D. Vance didn't go right after his former colleague. He did go after some of his allies, though. And he attacked them online and said, this is wrong. This is insane. You don't understand. This is the man. Donald Trump wants him. So those games are no longer working because of a really engaged group of people from Vance to the middle management back to the ideas.
Well, JD Vance is making a huge difference. Elon Musk is also making a huge difference, right? He went out there over the weekend and was like, hey, sending an email. What'd you do last week, right? You're supposed to go through and reply to 5 different things that they did last week. But Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard and FBI Director Kash Patel were going out through and saying, oh, hold on. We are not going to have our people go through. Please ignore that last email. So what's your take on all this chaos, right? Elon wants to get a job done. Trump is retweeting all this stuff. What's going on right now with this?
Elon Musk is doing some incredible work here, but Elon Musk is also new to governance completely, 100% a novice. So that's a superpower because he's willing to push things in a way that all those old hats will say, well, you can't do that. And he'll say, well, I just did. We just did do that. And the president backs it. And that's actually a way that's incredibly great at getting things done. One of the most frustrating parts about a lot of different veterans of Washington politics is those are the people who have the least inertia. They're kind of used to the way things are, and they no longer even see just how crooked and corrupt it is because for many of us, it's always been that way. That's the way it is. You fight where you can fight, and Elon Musk brings fresh eyes to that. But at the same time, and by the way, the Democrats claiming that it's a constitutional crisis to explain what you did in your work week is stupid. It's not going to work, and no one cares. It's not going to convince anyone. That's just a dumb take by Democrats. It's a dumb talking point. But at the same time, you saw this from Tulsi Gabbard, you saw this from Kash Patel, people who are working on criminal investigations, people who are working in intelligence, and not going to send 5 bullet points on a public email of the different things they did. They're involved in spycraft investigations. And also, when you've got people like Kash, who are very interested in doing their jobs, who are going to be very good at it, I think he's going to want to follow that process and not get tangled up in any kind of judge saying, well, this authority or that authority or this authority. He's going to check every box when he investigates, and then he's going to dismiss people based on where he wants to do that. So as you get these experienced personnel and director positions throughout the Trump administration, I think you'll generally see a slowing of some of what Doge has been doing because you have directors who want to continue that mission, but they don't feel the need to do it this week. They might work it out and do it by the books and avoid the lawsuits over the next 2.5 years.
Yeah. So what's interesting about this right now is I don't think it's planned myself, but Elon is playing this enormously important song and dance role where, he's with a chainsaw on national TV, freaking out a left that's absolutely melting down. I was next to a lady on the plane on the way out here who was, she was ready to leave America. She was going to renounce her citizenship. She's very concerned with fascism that's going to happen here. And this is a political class that's melting down. And Elon is taking a lot of the heat. He's jumping around and doing a lot of this stuff. I almost see this as, maybe I'm too sanguine about it, but I see this as a good thing. It's going to help as people like Russ Vought and Kash Patel go in there. They're going to do things like by the book. Like you say, they know what they're doing and they have plans and they're going to be rolling that out. I can't imagine that Elon and Trump are going to be upset at this. And the sense that we got walking around there last week was that everyone's sort of firing, in the same direction, but separately. And over time, as these leaders come into place, you would imagine the grooves will be set and it will become more organized. But I don't want to be too hopeful in front of the audience. But I genuinely feel like that this is actually true.
I know you're so happy, you're so cheerful
So
these
weird.
days, Matt. Yes, you think there's going to be a future for the country, and I get it because you, I think, like all of us, at some point had wondered, is this going to change? And you need that kind of outside chaotic force to actually push it. And another thing about this administration, which applies to Doge and these secretaries and applies to what I was talking about earlier, is that the courage is contagious. It absolutely is. People had their hair on fire during the first administration. One, they didn't really get Donald Trump, who is hysterical and tells jokes and and posits completely insane ideas and different solutions that he does just to troll people and mess with them. It's one of his greatest attributes. People almost every single day in the White House in the first administration would light their hair on fire. Oh my gosh, this is abnormal. This is not allowed. This is not how we do things. And you'd have leakers running to the press trying to protect their reputation as opposed to the president who they work for every day. And you see it, the amount of people, most of them have faded away. Some of them are still on shows like The View. But the amount of people who just made a reputation of saying, I am the good Republican, not like this. You don't have that anymore. You realize that they're not going to hurt you. You realize that the other side is morally bankrupt in a lot of these different matters. Not everyone, but they've really abandoned the causes where they had moral currency for ones where they have none. And it's spreading. And you don't see the leaks. You see people working in concert. Some of them will be the chaotic jester type, and some of them will be the Black Knight or the executioner or the magistrate type. All these different kind of characters coming together on the 50th anniversary of Dungeons & Dragons to run this court. But yeah, it's contagious and it's running significantly more smoothly, and this is just another aspect of that.